As artists, we've all asked ourselves, what's the one thing I can make that truly fuels me? The thing that gives new inspiration, that makes me feel alive. For us, we realized it wasn't just about the work, it's about connection. That spark when you see yourself in someone else's struggle, someone else's rebellion. This podcast is our act of rebellion against the silence of creating alone. We hit record and said, just publish. At its core, Rebel Artists Through Time is about building a community of creators, past and present. We dive into the lives of history's rebels, artists, filmmakers, musicians, and writers, because their echoes are still with us. Their stories fuel ours. And as we tell them, we shine a light forward toward the new voices emerging today. It's our way of saying, you're not alone in the struggle. You're part of the lineage of legends. And if you've ever felt restless, misunderstood, or on fire with an idea you just couldn't put down, you're already one of us. This is Rebel Artists Through Time. Sebastian, how's it going in Paris, France?
In Paris, France, it is finally sunny. We had a great week. Everybody came out, It's fantastic. And how about you? How's it going over in Toronto?
Things are okay here.
So,
You know all this business with this trade war with Canada-US? I'm not going to talk about politics, this is just set up. I saw this nature photographer snap a picture of a lone Canada geese just resting, and then all of a sudden a bald eagle swoops in and attacks it. And it turns into this big scruff, and then the goose actually fights back and actually chases the eagle, and the eagle gets so tired and he just dips. Beautiful picture. I wish I could show you right now. You just see this goose with its wingspan open going, ha! Chasing after this eagle that's just in too much for what he asked for. And I think it was the perfect image to go with this trade war that's happening with Canada and the Americans.
how little food did that eagle have to be like, I'm gonna eat that goose.
You're gonna take a risk on the goose. Guess must have been pretty hungry.
Must have been really hungry. Yeah, or it was the daddy eagle, who was wanting to impress the family.
Look what I brought. Look what I brought, kids. I brought one of them Canadians for us to feast on tonight. As if Canadians are that threatening,
Well, they used to be, Oh, some of those still are.
No, we're too polite. We're kind of pushovers, but we're very proud.
Yeah, it's true.
Anyway,
proud people, like Canadians.
So this is our first time recording one of these, right?
Yeah, this is the first.
Our first crack at what we're calling the Rebel Artists Through Time podcast. So welcome, everybody. Our short form is RATT, or what I like to call is RATT. Ta-ta. That's what I'm going to call it. But yeah, on this show, I guess just for context, on this show, we're going to talk about like artists through time, and we're not talking like rebels, like, rappers from the hood or graffiti artists, rebelling against the government, no Rage Against the Machine stuff. We want to talk about artists that broke and changed the mediums, their respective mediums that they operated in. From filmmakers, singers, writers, artists, painters, whoever we just feel like talking about.
Yeah, that's a really good definition, actually. Yeah, it's more like the kind of innovators of their time.
Exactly.
Which I guess by proxy are rebels, because if you're an innovator, you're going against the common grain, as it were. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's cool. And today we're going to talk about J.R.R., right?
Yeah, today our first, it's a pretty opportune pick. We wanted to choose someone that we were both kind of, is very important to us. We've probably spent much of our child and adult lives, almost the entire span of our friendship, talking about this man and his works. We're talking today about J.R.R. Tolkien, Professor... actually, what is J.R.R.? What is his actual name? John Ronald Roll Tolkien? It's something like that. Anyway, everyone just calls him like J.R.R.
Because for the sake of facts here, I've forgotten what it was actually.
Yeah, let me like get this name right. What is J.R.R.?
I don't know his fucking name, but we know everything else.
Anyway, we chose to talk about this guy because Sebastian and I are both... Oh, here it is. John Ronald Reuel Tolkien. So I was right. Okay, thank God.
Yeah, you were right. You nailed it.
I was right.
Yeah, you absolutely nailed it.
The Reuel was a family name passed down through generations. Oh, there you go.
Well, there you go. There it is.
And he was born January 3rd, 1892 in Bloemfontein, Orange Free State, which is in modern-day South Africa. So those who don't know, he's actually from South Africa.
Yeah, which is pretty amazing because he was really like... I always forget that he was from South Africa because he's so quintessentially English.
Yeah.
You know? And
he came over to England with his mom, like, still very young.
Yeah, how old was he when he came over? Do you know? Have you got it there?
It doesn't say here. It just says he was orphaned at the age of 12, raised by a Catholic priest, Father Francis Morgan, studied at Exeter College, Oxford, specializing in philology and Old English.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But the most important facts here, as I'm reading it, about his early life and early career is that he served in the First World War. Which is pretty important because it influenced a lot of his later writings.
Yeah, but I think also it influenced because when Lord of the Rings was written, he was in his sort of 50s. Right?
I'm not too sure because actually no, I think you're right. Born in 92 and the books came out in the 50s.
On 60, yeah, because I think he was in his 40s when he wrote The Hobbit. So The Hobbit was 1937, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And because I always thought that because actually the parts, I mean, like both of us are reading it, right? But I remember when I first read it when I was 18, and
just for context for our viewers, what are we reading?
We're reading The Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, we're both knee deep in our a second, or is this your third?
This is my second.
Okay, it's my second as well.
Yeah, and I just finished Fellowship of the Ring.
Oh, you're just done. Okay, cool.
Yeah, and you're deeper in than I am. Are you finished yet?
I'm like just over halfway through of book 5 in Return of the King. So it's just the Siege of Gondor has ended. The characters, the allies have won the battle and pushed back the foes of Sauron at Pelennor Fields, and now we're into the Houses of Healing. So it's like the reprieve.
Yeah, right. I can't wait to get to that. There's so much good stuff in there. And what's amazing at Fellowship of the Ring is like if you know the movies, like 95% of what's in the book is not in the movie.
I wouldn't about
really crazy.
About 95%. I think the books are actually pretty faithfully adapted, but there's a lot that's removed.
There's so much, especially in Fellowship.
I think for good reason though. For a movie, it was it makes sense why it was removed.
You don't think Tom Bombadil would work in the movie?
No. No, so many people, like, especially in the year, when did it come out? 2001? So many people would have checked out.
Well, I guess it's like one of those interesting things that when you're in a book, you can get away with like this balance between fairy tale-ish and serious.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got some genuine, and going back to the World War I thing, like the horror parts in the book are way worse than in the movie.
Yeah.
You know, like they're really dark. But then in the book, you can get away with having that and having a tubby guy who sings and picks lilies for his wife.
Yeah.
But I think if you're making a movie, you gotta pick which lane you're going to be in. Whether you're going to take it seriously or whether you're going to be more fairy tale like. And Tom Bombadil was also cut from the Ralph Bakshi version, which is kind of disappointing. You know,
because he doesn't really serve the plot or Frodo's character arc. And I mean, in Frodo's character arc, he says I think one very important line that'll like pay off like in the end in his like the Grey Havens, but it's not necessarily needed for say like the films because he's very much like a side quest or just a stopping point for the characters to kind of reprieve and rest.
Yeah, it is cool though how he puts on the ring and nothing happens.
Yeah, he's a very mysterious character. He's like even older than Gandalf, older than even the trees. He's like the oldest.
He's older than everyone, isn't he?
He's the oldest being in Middle Earth, and he's just this river guy that likes to sing songs.
Yeah, it's quite nice. It works. Most people get stuck at that point, but it gets blown out of proportion because, you know, like what people who don't like that part say it's the whole, you know, but it's only one chapter. It's actually not that long. I was kind of surprised this time reading.
It's not even the best chapter of Fellowship of the Ring. It's not even the
best
fifth
chapter, but
best chapter.
I like it. I like that.
I like it too, but like, there's better things about Lord of the Rings than Tom Bombadil. People make such a big deal.
As far as in line of the theme of the show, I guess it would be good to mention to anybody listening that the reason why we're going to talk about Tolkien is because nowadays, especially these days, fantasy is very, very popular. Sort of, there's all these staples of creating fantasy, like every fantasy book you pick up has a map in the front, right, of a world. There's a world that's being created. These days, because of writers like Brandon Sanderson, there's a thing called a magic system with a lot of writers kind of adhere to. You have to create a magic system. You have to create races and history and, well, history fictional being lore.
And a bunch of names.
And a bunch of names, yeah. And all of that now is very, very normal. And whereas when Tolkien did it, it was totally new. Completely new. And Tolkien got his, like any modern day fantasy writer takes at least some inspiration from The Lord of the Rings, which is an amazing legacy. But Tolkien was obsessed with fairy tales. And what's kind of interesting about his work is that his creatures, like the elves and the dwarves, are actually closer to what the real fairy tale elves and dwarves were like. Which is why he really detested Disney.
Did he really? I did not know this.
Yeah, he absolutely hated Disney.
It seems like he hated a lot of things that weren't.
He hated a lot of things, but he had a really interesting point. He actually, okay, this is interesting. So he hated Disney because of Snow White, right? Because, and this is cool. I don't know whether you know this. So when Snow White came out, Tolkien went to see it, and he was disgusted because the dwarves, which are like to him a beloved fairy tale creature, but they were reduced to these sort of dumb, comedic characters.
Happy,
and to him,
happy, snory, lazy,
right? And so he was really kind of insulted by this, and because of this is like the crazy thing. Because of this, he deliberately spelt the plural of dwarves with a V and an E, and he's the only guy who does it. The plural of dwarves is dwarfs with an F.
Oh, with an F?
Yeah, like Tolkien deliberately spelt it with a V, so that it would be different from the dwarves of pop culture. And the other thing was that because of Christmas elves, this is nuts. Because of Christmas
like
elves,
Santa's elves.
He regretted calling his race elves because he felt that they were now associated with these ridiculous little Christmas elf creatures, which he didn't realize that, later he would actually, his elves are really kind of probably the first thing you think of when you think of elves.
I see.
But in his day, he said he wrote a letter saying how he regretted it because it was associated with this.
Yeah, his elves are meant to be very eloquent, beautiful, and articulate, and beautiful in all the in every sense.
Yeah, they're kind of angelic, right? They're like
angelic. That's a better word. Yeah.
Yeah, they're interesting, and they're based on, because a lot of his stuff was based on. I think they come from Norse mythology, because he was really interested in Norse mythology. And the mythology of the German.
Inspired. I have some facts here. Inspired by Norse, Anglo-Saxon, and Celtic myths. That's right. Yeah. Particularly in the story of Beowulf.
Yeah. And he did. He wrote a book about Beowulf and so a study of it. But he was quite bitter is a strong word, but he was a little resentful of the fact that England didn't really have a good mythology. There's like King Arthur is basically the biggest one that.
Literally, all of Middle-earth is kind of like his ode to giving England an ancient myth, because a lot of the old English stories and folklore was wiped out by the Norman invasion. Is that right? I think it's. Yes. I think that's that's right. Where I heard somewhere along the way. That's why Tolkien is really passionate about writing this Middle-earth story.
Yeah, because he wanted to write a mythology for England. Yeah, and actually, because all that stuff that he wrote in the Silmarillion, which wasn't really. We were talking about that a bit before. Like, neither of us have read the Silmarillion.
Yeah, kind of a joke. Like, okay, well, are you a true fan? Have you read the Silmarillion?
Okay, I mean, and that would be a really valid point. But the issue with the Silmarillion is that it was never really meant to be read as a book, and he created that since he was a teenager. He was creating this world
when he was in the trenches of the first.
Yeah, even when he was in the
trenches, writing these languages that he invented.
Just like there's this interview with him from the 60s where he's talking about how he'd be really creeped out if he met a group of people who could speak Elvish. And there's like There is.
Even though there's probably
It's
tons of
awesome.
people who can actually speak it now.
Yeah. I'm sure, but yeah, but apparently he'd written all this stuff, and C.S. Lewis, he gave it to C.S. Lewis to look at, and C.S. Lewis apparently was the one who said, "Man, you got to write a novel." And so he started writing The Hobbit, and people who are listening probably have seen the interviews, but the story is that he was grading papers. He was a professor at Oxford University.
Oh yes, this is the
And
famous tale.
yeah, and he was grading papers, and he was really bored, and he turned the page over, and there was a blank page that had been mixed in with and he said he almost gave 5 extra marks to have this blank page. And at the top of it, he wrote, "In a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit." And it was originally not meant to be part of Middle Earth, The Hobbit. It was just meant to be a standalone book.
Like a children's, just like a simple children's novel.
Right.
But I think it became way more popular than he was expecting.
Oh yeah, I think it probably wasn't even. He was much more popular because he didn't. Those were really the only pieces of fiction that he. I mean, the only Lord of the Rings is massive, but those were the only 2 pieces of fiction he published, I think, because all the rest of the stuff that you can buy on the bookshelves now was mostly it was published by his son Christopher Tolkien. Yeah, so he was, because most of his stuff was actually academic. He was an academic guy, and similar to C.S. Lewis, really, because in C.S. Lewis, most of the stuff he wrote was nonfiction. And the 2 of them had had a kind of a meaningful fictional period where they...
And a great affinity for fantasy writing, because there wasn't a lot of that going around at the time. I'm not sure what the popular books were in the early 20th century. What I can think of is like Great Gatsby, stuff during like the Roaring 20s.
Not even that, because The Great Gatsby, like Scott Fitzgerald and Hemingway and all those kinds of people, they were the modernists. And so the stuff that they were writing in the 20s was kind of like, it was the new wave of writing.
Did he precede Fitzgerald and Hemingway?
I actually have no idea. I've been meaning to look that up for a long time. I know that he hated it. I do know there's 2 things I know. I know that he hated Dune.
Yes. Yeah. Well, we should definitely talk about that. But I would just like to quickly interject. With The Hobbit is almost, because he was such a big fan of Beowulf, The Hobbit is almost like his take on a 20th century Beowulf, because it is very much like a same main character has to slay or encounter the dragon kind of story. Except the protagonist, Bilbo Baggins, doesn't become a knight in shining armor. He has to like become a thief. Which is like very strange. It's not a very respectable profession to be a thief. So it was like quite different and strange, but it's got the Beowulf influence in there.
Yeah, it was very different for its time, because I mean that's 1937. The only other piece of fantasy work that I know from that time, but it was started in the 40s, was Gormenghast. Have you ever heard of that?
I've never heard of it.
So Gormenghast was written by a British author called Mervyn Peake, and it was made into a famously awful TV show.
There seem to be a lot of those, aren't there?
Yeah, and hence why most people don't know about it now. But it was a fantasy kind of epic about a crumbling Gothic castle called Gormenghast. And that was in the 40s, but no one had done that world building, because that's the big thing that Tolkien did was the world building. And I mean, the insane thing is the languages thing, because he would, like I said, he was a philologist, and so he had he had the skills to create a language, and he did, like, for fun, he liked making languages. Like, I mean, it's pretty nuts, really.
Yeah, he made a language for the elves. I think 2 languages for the elves called Quenya and Sindarin, which draw from Finnish and Welsh. And he also wrote a language for the dwarves, which sounds very Norse. Even like their hieroglyph symbols feel very Norse. Right. And he even wrote black speech for the orcs. I don't know which language influences black speech. I'd be afraid to say. It might be showing Tolkien's bias or offense. I just pretend that black speech sounds like German, because German's a very harsh language, isn't it? And Tolkien had to fight the Germans. He lived to see the Germans, fight them not once but twice. So,
oh my God.
But The Hobbit, I wanted to actually mention this back before when we talk about The Hobbit. Jumping off what you said, that it was never meant to be this big mythology. It was just supposed to be a simple children's novel. Yeah, it was actually that the publisher came to him asking for a sequel to The Hobbit because it was so successful. And he just started writing it,
Right.
but the writing and writing went on for over 10 years, close to 15 years, and he finally delivered a sequel to The Hobbit, and it was this massive 1,000-page manuscript called Lord of the Rings that was like so much bigger than even he had originally planned, and it was like so far and different and much darker that they actually had to go back and re-edit The Hobbit into a new edition that was a bit closer to his new book.
Yeah, well, I think the only part that he actually edited in The Hobbit was the part with Gollum.
Yeah, the riddles in the dark.
Yeah,
that's like the best part. That's like probably the best part of The Hobbit.
Oh yeah, for sure. But because apparently in the original version, I don't know if you can get the original edition now, but in the original edition, he references it as the Red Book, right?
Yeah,
The Hobbit. And he makes a joke about it in Lord of the Rings. Because he
is that the book Bilbo writes in the
he said that Bilbo's
I'm thought of an ending for my book.
and he makes a joke somewhere because he went back and edited the part, and he makes a joke somewhere that Bilbo didn't remember the events properly because he went back and changed it. Because in the original, Gollum just kind of gives him the ring.
Yeah, he's not as a threatening character with all that incredible backstory that he eventually got later on.
Yeah.
So, like, why would you want to read that old edition? Because this new one is just so much deeper. And Gollum is the best, if not maybe the second best character in the entire story of all his books.
Yeah, he's maybe the most iconic, isn't he?
I think Gandalf probably is probably the most iconic because he's like the wizard archetype. I feel like every wizard that has preceded Gandalf in any fiction, in any medium, is just kind of basically inspired by Gandalf in some form. Like even Dumbledore from the Harry Potter books functions like the Gandalf archetype, or even Obi-Wan Kenobi in the original Star Wars has that Gandalf archetype. They both die in the first arc of their trilogy at a similar point, like when Gandalf falls from fighting the Balrog, same as Obi-Wan when he dies from fighting Darth Vader.
I never thought about that connection. Yeah. And then he comes back stronger and more powerful than that.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, yeah, I never thought about that. My favorite theory that I heard, I was in a bar in Newfoundland a few years ago, and we got to talking about Lord of the Rings, and there was a guy in there, and he said something, I always remembered it, that he felt that Gandalf was Tolkien putting himself in the story, and that Gandalf the Grey was the Professor Tolkien, with the pipe, and he's hanging out with the hobbits and like old England kind of thing, this kind of loving fairy tales and all the rest. He's got those massive eyebrows that go up.
Smokes pipe weed.
Yeah, and then Gandalf the White was like military Tolkien.
That's interesting. I've never looked at it that way. I think that's very appropriate and correct.
I think so too, because then he comes in and he's the guy, right? He's the leader.
Yeah, he comes back because he's got his task is to kind of help guide the peoples of Middle-earth because his counterpart Saruman was corrupted and abused his power as the White Wizard. And so Gandalf was forcibly, all right, kid, wrap him up, put him back in.
Yeah.
Off the bench.
Do you remember,
buddy?
Do you remember in the book when he's talking about meeting Saruman, and Saruman has changed in the book? He's like changed his white cloak to be many colors.
Yeah.
Light shifts.
This was not in the movies, probably for a good reason, because it might have looked a little hokey and weird. Like
it might.
Saruman becomes LSD Saruman.
Yeah, but in the book it's great because Saruman's like.
And even in the Bakshi version.
And then Gandalf is just like, I think I prefer white.
Yeah.
It's just like, just kind of cuts
Gandalf, when he returns in the Two Towers, he kind of has to hoist all of Middle-earth, all the characters on his back. He's the team carry. He's got to run all the way to Fangorn Forest, save Merry and Pippin, and make an alliance with the Ents, get that alliance going. And then it has to meet up with Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli and say, okay, the hobbits are safe. Now we got to go to Edoras. We need to go to Edoras. It's an emergency. And then he's talk to Theoden and break Saruman and Grima Wormtongue's hold on Theoden. And then once that's done and gets Theoden, corrected in the head, he's got to run all the way after Faramir, who's been banished, get him to come back and help save Helm's Deep. And then when Helm's Deep, the battle is won, he's got to take Pippin all the way to Minas Tirith and help defend Minas Tirith from the assault and siege. So he's got to run all over the place.
Yeah, he's really got his work cut out for him, and in when he comes back.
So
For sure.
I think Gandalf the White as war military officer of Tolkien, I think, is appropriate. That must have been
I think so
what he
too.
felt like, or his role was during the First World War. I don't know how if he was like one of the older guys there, one of the older officers, but I guess he had some sort of seniority over the other British soldiers, maybe.
Well, he might have been an officer because he was university educated.
Yeah.
Because you can join as an officer if you're university. Well, if he was born in 92, then yeah, he would have been 20 by 1912. So yeah, he would have been. He's in his 20s. So yeah, he would have been one of the relatively older guys.
Yeah. Probably would have had seniority over the others. I actually heard that one of his roles in the British military was he was a horse breaker. He helped break in horses and get them battle ready for cavalries.
Really?
Which explains probably why he has such affinity for horses. He even takes the time out of his precious prose and paragraphs to talk about horses and like why they're named. You know, he has like horses named Shadowfax and Snowmane. He has an entire civilization of the Rohan, basically all centered around the fact that they ride horses.
Yeah, right. Because in the movies, it doesn't explain that Shadowfax is from Rohan, right?
Shadowfax is in fact Theoden's horse, and Theoden, because he's kind of like an old man on his last like crippling days, he lends and gives Shadowfax to Gandalf, who has more use of it.
Yeah, right. One of my favorite Tolkien things was, have you ever heard of the book Beren and Luthien?
Yeah. This is the story that Aragorn tells the hobbits when they're camping at Weathertop.
Yeah, do you know that so that Beren and Luthien are supposed to be the ancient version of Arwen and Aragorn?
Yeah.
The story they mirror?
Where a mortal man woos and falls in love with an immortal elf, and they fall in love with each other, even though their relationship is doomed from the start, but yet they fall in love and commit anyways. Very romantic.
Yeah, and Elrond is actually one of their children.
Oh, I did not know this.
Yeah, because you know that he's half human, right? He's half human, half elf.
Okay, I see.
And he's one of their children. But it's kind of cute because he had his wife. They met when they were sort of 21, I think, and they fell madly in love, and they had a favorite cafe in England where they would sit on. There was like a balcony. You could sit up on the balcony, and you know how people used to wear those old hats. You know, everyone wore a hat back in the day, right? With the little dimple in the top. And he and his wife would throw sugar cubes into people's hats as they passed by. But when
he was one of the hobbits.
But when they died, they were buried together, and on their gravestone it says Beren and Luthien.
Yeah, they're buried next to each other.
Yeah, it's Beren and Luthien. Yeah, but I mean, I don't know how. I don't get the sense with him that he realized. I don't think he set out to be revolutionary. I kind of think he just had this passion to do something. Or then again, I mean, the interesting thing with this show, because I don't know how many people who are innovative or rebellious actually mean to be.
I think this is an interesting question. I think revolutions aren't decided by the artists. It's kind of taken by by the audience and the effect that their work has.
Yeah, because they're just doing what they love, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Tolkien is like kind of a nerd, right? He's got his world and his languages and everything. I think he just kind of was doing what he loved, but he changed everything forever. I mean, we wouldn't have the amount of stories we wouldn't have if it wasn't for him is insane.
Yeah. Why Lord of the Rings is called like the godfather of all modern fantasy and science fiction.
Well, yeah,
it kind of set the bar.
Yeah, absolutely. It really set the bar because nothing else was. I mean, you got like Chronicles of Narnia, but Chronicles of Narnia is like, which also Tolkien hated Chronicles of Narnia, which was one of the reasons why he and C.S. Lewis stopped being friends.
Can I take a guess? Was it because Chronicles of Narnia is very influenced by Christian writings and mythology?
That was one of the reasons why, because he hated allegory.
Yeah. This also ties to why he hated Dune, which we'll get into in a minute.
Yes, and what I find fascinating about Lord of the Rings, knowing that he hated allegory. When you read Chronicles of Narnia, it's like it's really obvious, you know.
Aslan
He's
is
talking about
Jesus.
yeah, it's just really
Aslan
obvious.
he makes the sacrifice for everyone, gets put on a stone slab, and then is
Yeah, and then he gets resurrected.
crucified and then resurrected and then comes back.
Yeah, and he gets his mane shorn off. You know, yeah, there's all that.
Yeah, Aslan the lion is Jesus.
What's amazing though about Lord of the Rings is that you get without using allegory, you understand what it means, according to Tolkien, what it means to be Christian from it without it being an allegory. You know, it's like the energy of the story and what it talks about, the values it, you know, because it oozes like values, right? It's like companionship and fighting together and doing the right thing, standing up against evil, resisting, you know, because you have to resist the ring and the powers of evil, and
very much about
and
addiction as well.
yeah, and the sacrifice for the good of what you believe in, which is all Christian thought, you know. And so without using allegory, you know, he perfectly kind of created this kind of the soul, you know, because for me, like I like the Chronicles of Narnia, but it is very allegorical, and it's sort of like, oh yeah, this is this, this is that, this is the other. But I think Lord of the Rings for me is like the soul of Christianity. You know, it's it gives you that real feeling of the values and the and it's got the whole thing, you know, Gandalf is like the guy who rises from the dead and everything else, but it's not done in a way that's allegorical, and it's done in this very profound way.
I think if I'm to kind of to decipher why he hated allegories, he feels that a story is more lasting through future generations when it isn't an allegorical of something else that's relevant to the current generation or of the times. Whereas like Lord of the Rings can be read probably 200 years from now and be interpreted and connect to people then in a totally new and different way than to us now. Like when they look and see the ring, it's a very addictive, and it pulls you in as like a lust. It's almost got like a power in of itself that could be applicable is the right word. Not allegorical, but applicable. The ring could be applicable to many things depending on who you are and where you're from. I remember when I first read Lord of the Rings, after I finished it, I immediately kind of made the connection that the ring is almost like our cell phones, and how addictive they can be, and we can't stop looking at them. And if we lose our phone for even 30 seconds, we're like, where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? We almost become like Frodo and Gollum. In a way, we're addicted to that power. We love it and hate it at the same time, which are like all the same things that are said about the ring.
And it's got the eye too, right? It's always watching you.
Yeah, yeah.
It's very similar. It makes life easier.
But like, as a guy who, you know, from like Gen Z, whatever generation we are, that's just the connection I made. With the ring,
yeah, you can
always.
Other
people could say, "Oh, the ring is a metaphor for drugs." It could easily be an argument made for that as well.
And the original argument that was made that it was a metaphor for the H bomb, but I mean, Tolkien said he wrote about the ring and what it was before the H bomb was invented. So you know, it's kind of. But I mean, my favorite, I think, to be honest, like one of the things I wonder about is that, you know, these really old stories like the Odyssey, and you know, if you study these ancient stories, or even like biblical stories, you know, if you study all these stories, they have a very deep meaning to them. But there's sort of the story of the time that's telling you something. Like the Odyssey is a really classic example where it's kind of a parable. And there's a lot of meaning to that story, you know, but we look at it now. And we say, did that happen? Did that actually happen? Which is a really stupid thing to ask, you know, because that's not what the point of the story is.
Exactly.
So I
think
think
not the point.
I think 1,000 years in the future, people will pick up Lord of the Rings and be like, did that actually happen?
Yeah, right. You know that. Yeah, people like, might actually make that connection, assuming we're all speaking the same languages 1,000 years from now.
Well, we might not be, you know. I mean, I was thinking about that the other day. You know, 2,000 years ago, in the time of time of Jesus and everything, you know, his stuff is being talked about in a language that wasn't even invented then. I mean, English wasn't around at that point. So in the future, maybe it'll be translated into whatever
whatever
language
language
he's
is at the
speaking.
time. Yeah, I think it's almost certainly because of how fast things are changing now. But regardless, back to let's get back to Tolkien. Earlier, I think we said we'd talk about why he hated Dune.
Yeah,
Or just his dissent and disdain for allegories. I was saying earlier that he prefers Lord of the Rings to be more applicable so that it carries different meanings for different people across generations.
Yeah.
Whereas like allegories, like the opposite, it's very much referring to something else that's either in the world or of the times. And Dune is famously an allegory for the Middle East before, during, and after like the First World War. I always call it Dune. It's basically Lawrence of Arabia in space.
Yeah.
Because Frank Herbert was he famously read T.E. Lawrence's book, The 7 Pillars of Wisdom.
Yeah.
I guess for context, Lawrence of Arabia is that famous tale of the British officer that helped, he was a white guy who helped fight the Arabs against the Ottomans during the First World War.
Yeah, it's a
Which is very much story. Like Dune, where it's about a white guy, Paul Atreides, comes in and helps the indigenous people of the desert, the Fremen, fight against the Harkonnens.
Well, this was kind of one of the reasons why Tolkien didn't like it, was because Tolkien had a very, if you look at his sort of philosophy, he was a monarchist, and he believed that. I mean, the reason why he was a monarchist was interesting, because he believed that anybody who wanted to be in power, like a politician, was crooked from the start.
I tend to share that belief, actually.
Yeah, and so his belief was that if a monarchy was done correctly, and he has this example of someone like Aragorn, and Aragorn's a really ancient idea of the noble king, someone who can fight, someone who who's knowledgeable, someone who's wise, and so he had that. But also there's this clear idea in Lord of the Rings of like good and evil, and Since Tolkien was a Catholic, he didn't believe in an absolute evil. He believed in absolute good that you could fall from. And sort of his main villain, Morgoth, is someone who's fallen from grace, not someone who was evil to begin with.
Do you agree with that sentiment, by the way? Do you think everyone has absolute good and that their choices are what makes them fall into evil? I actually feel like I disagree. I feel like most people have a tendency to be good and bad. I think it's more gray than good and evil.
I tend to think that there is a source of evil. I think there is an absolute evil. That there's both. There's an absolute good and an absolute evil. I mean, that's my sort of feeling. I'm
not religious. I'm not religious, so I can't really connect to his philosophy on this in that way.
But the issue with his philosophy that I've always had is that, if in order for something to fall to evil, evil has to exist to begin with.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So, what's that? That's always been my problem with that thing.
This has become a deep philosophical discussion that I don't think I'm smart enough to engage in. I would have to read more.
I wish we had Tolkien here.
But I think it's still worth discussing.
But anyway, so he didn't like Frank Herbert's really cynical take on how people the Messiah story, and how the Messiah story is basic in Dune. The Messiah story is completely manufactured, right?
Yeah,
it has nothing to do with anything godly. It's manufactured by the Bene Gesserit faction,
the covenant of witches that kind of pull the puppet strings of all the different houses and the politics of the universe.
That's right.
To lead the way to their Messiah, the Kwisatz Haderach or whatever it's called.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So like the Fremen have their Messiah, and even the Bene Gesserit have their Messiah. So it's like it's more of a holistic commentary on messiahs and a cautionary tale of them.
Right, and how you should be very distrusting of charismatic leaders. And the Christ was a charismatic leader, and so the parallels between Paul Atreides and Jesus Christ are really, really obvious. Like it's made painfully obvious, and especially as you were saying that while there's things like spice was kind of an allegory for oil in the Middle East.
Arrakis sounds like Iraq.
Sounds a lot like Iraq. Yeah, that was actually really on the nose.
It's very on the nose.
And but also the fact that it's based in that part of the world makes it even more obvious that it's kind of and the holy city, right, and the pilgrims and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And
I even have a Persian friend who hasn't read the books, but he watched the films, and he even said that some of like the Fremen words are actually like Persian words.
Yeah, which brings me round to the third reason why he likely didn't like it, because I don't think this is proven. But basically, if you've noticed with the names, the idea for Terminator came from Dune, because in Frank Herbert's lore, there was a war against the machines, thinking machines, which is why they have to use spice to navigate the universe. There's no computers, and it was called the Jihad, right?
No way!
And
Oh my god!
yeah.
Very
And so because Frank Herbert felt that by that time in the future, everyone would be Muslim.
really, he
And
thought
so, yeah, which is really interesting. So then, like, there's no proof of this, but I assume that pissed Tolkien off a little bit.
probably, yeah.
You know,
Being a very
I mean, any
Christian
Christian who's like reading this and is like, everyone's going to be Muslim is probably not very happy with that at that time, you know?
Yeah.
um,
By the
it's
way, we're not
interesting that-
saying that we dislike Dune or Chronicles of Narnia because they're so-called allegorical. It's just it is important to talk about
we
why
don't care.
Tolkien disliked them and probably disliked a lot of things, which he seemed to dislike a lot of things. But you know, at least for good reason, and so it's worth talking about, and how his
perspective was interesting. I think the fact that he was so academic was probably what came from that. Probably where that came from, because you know, like he didn't like Chronicles of Narnia because not just because of the allegory, but because how C.S. Lewis basically just took all these random mythological characters, and he also had Santa Claus in there.
yeah, I forgot Santa just shows up and gives the
Santa
kids
shows
gifts.
up, and
Yeah.
so to Tolkien, it was like you can't just take all these things and just randomly, without reference, put them in. And the famous one is the lamppost, because you know, like the lamppost in Chronicles of Narnia.
No, I don't know, but what's the significance of the lamppost?
But you know about the lamppost, right? That's in there.
Yeah, it's like the lamppost that the little girl sees when she walks through the wardrobe before she meets what's his name?
Tumnus, right?
Yeah, Mr. Tumnus. The what's
Mr.
his
Tumnus.
Species called?
Fawn.
He's a fawn. That's right.
But
so what's this about the
of,
lamppost?
So the first draft of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe had the lamppost, and Tolkien was like, man, it was one of the big things with him, because he was like, man, there's no way that a lamppost belongs in a story that has all these fairy tale creatures in it. Like, it's just ridiculous. At this point, you're taking the piss. And and C.S. Lewis was apparently so perturbed by that he deliberately made a point of making the lamppost a bigger part of the story than it was to begin with.
I mean, it took critical feedback.
Yeah, I know.
I wonder what kind of feedback C.S. Lewis gave to Tolkien when he was sharing like early drafts of Lord of the Rings. I mean, we'll never know.
Well, I think C.S. Lewis was a big fan of Lord of the Rings, which I think was why it was another reason why it was so hurtful to him that Tolkien didn't like C.S. Lewis's work. But yeah, it's interesting because I mean, C.S. Lewis was an atheist, right? And then Tolkien was the one who converted him to Christianity. But instead of becoming a Catholic, C.S. Lewis became an Anglican, Church of England, and it broke Tolkien's heart.
Oh no.
Yeah, but then C.S. Lewis had this career as a Christian apologist, where he published all these books like Mere Christianity and these other things, and he became really famous for his Christian work. And and then he married a divorced woman, which was one of the other reasons why Tolkien there was apparently some weird stuff that happened with that, and Tolkien wasn't very comfortable. But yeah, they had a whole thing. I mean, can you imagine that? You're friends with some. I mean, everyone has friends, and then there's drama, and then there's but that's like broadcast. Like everybody knows about this.
Tolkien was a very devout Christian. He even lost friends because of it. That's a shame.
Yeah, I think there were other reasons. I mean, there's always other reasons.
Reality is always bigger than what is always more complicated, a bigger picture than that. But
So do you think
let's get back to the story. I want to focus on Lord of the Rings, particularly with our rereads that we're both doing. So you just finished Fellowship of the Ring.
Yeah.
Right. What are your kind of like immediate thoughts on your second time? Because, I mean, yeah, you read it like the first time, and that's like you're kind of just like immersing and just taking it all in. But what have you kind of found and discovered or surprised you about the second one?
For me, I'm looking at it because from like a writer's perspective, I just noticed his style. He's got this really interesting style of writing where it's so crafted. It's like
It's almost
a work of
lyrical.
art. Yeah, it's almost lyrical.
I'm glad you brought
And
this up because I wanted to talk about his prose a little bit.
yeah, his prose. I love his prose. I know that some people find him to be too long-winded and too descriptive. I don't.
It's just a fair criticism, but when you actually like read his text and you almost like, it's not meant to be sped through or ingested, it's meant to be taken. You're supposed to like read it very slowly and almost like play the voice in your head.
Yeah, right.
It's almost like very poetic, and there's a lot of songs in there. And like some of these passages are just like so beautiful, even from his like, really characters like Denethor. Like the way Denethor articulates his speech is so like almost Shakespearean.
Denethor has my favorite line in all of Lord of the Rings.
I think I know what it is, but go ahead.
It says, "I will not bow to this ranger from the north, last of a ragged house, long bereft of lordship."
Yeah, like, Denethor really has some zingers, man.
Yeah.
Speaking of charismatic leaders, you should be cautious of.
Oh yeah,
because Denethor was a madman, but that's because he had one of the seeing stones, the Palantirs.
Yeah, which kind of is one of the things it's a shame that's missing from the movie, because in the movie it doesn't make sense why he's such an asshole.
It makes sense in the the extended editions, because it's revealed that he had a Palantir and then Aragorn looks into it.
Right, but you only know that's his Palantir if you know the books.
Exactly, yeah.
If you don't know the books, you're like, where did this Palantir come from? Or you assume it was the one that Pippin got.
Yeah. The same I guess for context, the Palantir is the same thing that Saruman uses to communicate with Sauron and Mordor. And it's the same the same device that corrupts him and makes him believe that all hope is doomed and that we should join with Sauron. The same thing happens with Denethor.
Yeah. That's why he can see what's happening in Mordor.
Yeah. I guess that really attunes to absolute good, is then, through their choices of fall from grace to become evil.
Yeah, right.
But let's get back to his prose.
Yeah, so I really... like I said, I write myself, and for something I'm working on at the moment, I went back to Lord of the Rings to get some inspiration, and it's so what gets me about him is that it's like he's telling you the story, and he does that in a really unique way. It's like, obviously whenever you write something that's fiction, you're telling whoever you're writing to a story, but it really feels personal, and you feel like he's there telling you the story in some way.
Like he's like old grandpa sitting you on his lap, and he's like an old tale, before bed.
Yeah, and there's these wonderful things in there, and I really love it. The only qualm that I have, to people's point about the descriptiveness, is like he has amazing description of the landscape and of where they're going and directions, and it's really specific, and it's fantastic, and you can really see the world. And I think we've talked about this before, that the way he describes the world is it's one of the few books that you can read after seeing the movie, and it's a completely different experience, both with the characters and with the landscape. But then he doesn't tell you what color Gimli's beard is.
Yeah. He doesn't explain every little bit, even though he describes
No, he doesn't do that. And so, I always imagined Gimli as being red-haired, because it would seem odd if he wasn't. But yeah, I really like his prose, and there is something about them that's really meticulous and really crafted well. Because if you read someone like Hemingway, it's like splattered on the page almost, and maybe didn't go back to it too much. Whereas Tolkien is obviously meticulous with how
he probably spent more time editing than actually writing. Maybe.
I'm sure he did. Yeah, because I think for the vision that he had for it, it's perfect. It's so well crafted. It's like a work of art. And so that's something
he describes a lot of landscapes, but even the way he writes action is very like poetic and lyrical. Like he says, Legolas's arrow and bow sings through the air. Like he uses like these verbs that aren't really associated with action, but it makes these acts of action much more heroic.
Yeah, for sure. And also very much like what they're up against is he's able to really get this feeling of dread and darkness
and despair. like there's a lot
despair,
of there's a lot of despair in all three books. It seems like all what we're going up against, there's no winning.
Yeah, there are. And remember, I don't know if you remember, but in the book, when they go to Moria, because in the movie they have that fight scene and the orcs break through and there's the troll and they kill the troll. Whereas in the book, just the troll's arm manages to get through the door to try to open, and Boromir goes to slash at the troll's arm, and it's like stone, and his sword bounces off of it. And it's like, I remember reading that and thinking, like, these guys are supposed to be up against the Lord of Darkness, you know? And it's like, if this troll got through it, which is kill all of them, it's like there's this real sense of vulnerability that he gets in the books. It's really amazing. And also, the books make me cry, too. The movies obviously do. But
was there a particular part or chapter that made you emotional?
Obviously, when Sam is like, he's like, I'm going with you, you know, when he's trying to sneak away on the boat, there's that part's really emotional.
Going to Mordor alone! Of course you are, Mr. Frodo, and I'm coming with you.
Yeah, it's really, there's something about that that's really emotional. And in the first one, I like when I get a little bit when Aragorn first kind of introduces himself as Aragorn, when they don't know if it's going to be Aragorn or not, and he says that line, by life or death I shall protect you.
Because if I wanted the ring for myself, I could have it.
Yeah, right. Yeah. One of the other parts. Oh yeah, John Hurt from the Ralph Bakshi. But the part that from the first time I reid it, one of the other parts I remember being emotional with was at Helm's Deep when. Because in the movie, it's Theoden who's doubting, and he's like, he doesn't, and Aragorn says, ride out with me. Whereas I remember in the book, it's Aragorn who comes in, and it's like, we got to get you out of here because we're losing the fort. And Theoden's the one who's like, no, let's ride out and meet them. And then the way he describes, like, Theoden's horse jumps out over the orcs, you know, and it's like, it's really amazing. And he comes out fighting. It's really fantastic.
It's a wonderful last stand moment.
Yeah, it's so
like we will make such a last stand that will be sung in the songs.
Yeah.
Which goes back to like this whole prose, and like things just feel so much more heroic and noble.
They do, yeah. He's got this. Yeah, they're really beautiful, and he's able. One thing I really respect about The Lord of the Rings, going back to the very beginning of our conversation, is that he's able to have this balance between this really good feeling fairy tale vibe and then somehow have this dark dread and horror as well, which is a really skillful thing to be able to do.
Mm-hmm. Dark dread and horror is like there's a lot more of that in Two Towers and beyond, and that's part of this part of my favorite parts. I just finished probably a couple of weeks ago the chapter of Shelob's lair. That whole section when Frodo and Sam go into that tunnel is just terrifying. The way he describes it, he's like, they can't. It's so dark that they can't see anything. They just see these 8 glowing eyes. It doesn't even tell you it's a spider for the longest time.
Doesn't he only see it because they're creeping along the wall and then they hear something and he pulls out that light thing, and that's
when they reach this end of the tunnel or the first hint of light, it's blocked by like rope webbing. He uses the word webbing, and that kind of gives you the first hint what the creature is or what it could be. And then when it finally reveals itself in there, like when Frodo goes on ahead and Sam chases Gollum backwards, but it then leaves Frodo unattended, and he returns, and Frodo's been stung by Shelob, and then Sam has to fight. Yeah. Sam has to fight the spider. It's really disgusting and terrifying. And it's like this creature, Shelob, is so old. It's like potentially even older than like Sauron himself. And that Sauron is like totally aware that Shelob exists in this like little dark tunnel crevices in like the mountains bordering his land. He knows it's there, but he's kind of like okay with this like this old spider being there because he kind of sees it as almost like another border guard to his land. And I remember that part the first time I read it. It's like that's one of the scenes for me that's worse than the movie. You know, it's like it's so creepy and dark, and they can't see anything. Yeah. No, the movie does a pretty good job, especially it deviates because Frodo goes into the tunnel by himself, which isn't in the books. They go in together. That was I mean, I don't dislike the change for the movie. I think it was appropriate. They needed to kind of drive a wedge between Frodo and Sam. I just love the moment when Sam like tumbles down the stairs and lands.
Yeah.
Sees it, like we pull back and we see the lembas bread and he crunches it. And you just see like the fury in his eyes, and he looks up and he says, "What am I doing? Why am I running away? I have to go help. I have to run back."
Yeah, right. I love when he shows up in the movie with the sword and the thing. He's like, "Let him go, you."
Oh yeah, it's so epic,
so good. Yeah. No, it works in the movie. I think everything they did in the movie works really well, except the one part that I think was so cool in the books is like when you remember in the movie where the wolf's head crashes through.
Oh yes, we've talked about this many times. The in the Battle of Minas Tirith, where they have that giant battering ram, the battering ram that breaks down the door, and then what is it in the movie? Gandalf says, "You're soldiers of Gondor. No matter what comes through that gate, you will stand your ground." And then like a bunch of trolls come in, and it's like played almost for like a gag.
Yeah,
but in the book, you go ahead, you explain it.
In the book, he says the same thing, and the gates swing open, and it's just the Witch King of Angmar on his horse, and he just like wanders through into the courtyard, and everyone runs still, you know, because it's just him. He just walks through.
Yeah, but it's so much more terrifying and climactic.
It's so terrifying.
It's like Gandalf has like finally met his match.
Yeah, and everyone runs. It's just one guy. Everyone runs. But they try to do that in the movie where he like breaks his staff and stuff, and it just doesn't work. But I love that scene in the books. He just saunters in, and there's something really. He's so calm and collected, which goes back to what I was talking about with how sinister sort of the evil force is in the books, and how powerful it sort of seems in comparison to what the good guys have.
Yeah.
I also love in the books these like massive expanses of nothingness. You know, there's like these massive lands of just barren. There's no people living there. There's nothing grows there. You know, there's the old lands that are cursed, where they go through a lot of them.
Like the Dead Marshes and Emyn Muil?
Not even the Dead Marshes. There's other places they go through in the Fellowship of the Ring. Like between Bree and the Misty Mountains is just nothing for like days and days and days and days. And it's and then also after they get out of Lothlorien, they go through these like large expanses of land that are kind of decayed a bit. Nothing like the Dead Marshes, but you know,
so the land and the world itself is falling under like corruption and despair.
Yeah,
just as
exactly.
The same as the characters.
Yeah, it gives you that kind of feeling.
Speaking of Lothlorien, you know when you said you get like emotional when you read the book as well? One of my favorite chapters when I was reading Fellowship, which was a while ago, but when we get to the Lothlorien chapter, it was like in the middle of Canadian summer, and I was reading it at like sunset outside in a park, laying on the grass, and it was like so serene and peaceful. And I was reading this chapter of Lothlorien where he just paints this beautiful picture of these trees as tall as skyscrapers with trunks as wide as buildings.
Yeah,
large gray trees, but all their leaves create a ceiling of golden leaves and golden light.
Right,
and
yeah.
I was just reading this while being outside and smelling the summer air, and I could just like picture being there, and it was just so... It's like one of the most beautiful things I've ever imagined in my life.
Yeah, it's really incredible. It's a really incredible thing.
I don't know why they didn't do that for the movie, because for the movie they make... Actually, you know what? I think I can think of a reason why. But like for the movie, they make Lothlorien much darker and more starry light. Almost celestial rather than, you know, very golden and serene. And I think that's why, because they wanted, I think for the film, they wanted to make Galadriel a much darker character. So they need to kind of make the setting that they were entering into perhaps a bit more suspicious and, you know, it has that reprieve, but it's still somber and kind of suspenseful, like completely out of trouble just yet.
Yeah.
And Galadriel, who's like so beautiful and is so loved by all the characters in the book, whereas like in the film, she's like much darker and telepathically speaks to each one of them.
Yeah, my favorite is there was like was it one of the Lord of the Rings memes that was like she told him that he was going to die in every movie that he was in.
Oh. That's so good. Yeah. But yeah, that was one of the parts of the book that made me emotional. The picture he paints of Lothlorien was so amazing.
It was, and there's that part in there that really got me where Aragorn is on the hill remembering something, obviously, that he did with Arwen, and he's lost in a memory of like when he and Arwen were there. And then he says, "Come on, Frodo, let's keep going." And he left, and the last line of the chapter is, "And he never returned to that place as a living man." And it's just like, that really got me, you know? It's kind of this finality. He's there. It's like a wonderful memory with his lover.
When a character dies or they do something very significant, like such a deed was never seen in this land again, and they never saw each other again. It has such a, like you said, that feeling of finality.
Yeah, there's a real feeling of finality. And there's also this feeling of the glorious past, right?
Yeah, it's very prevalent in Lord of the Rings because, like, was it the last alliances are all dead? Like, all the races don't really get along anymore.
Yeah,
everyone's very separate and distant, and it's because they've all become vulnerable to Sauron taking over again because they're not as aligned as they used to be in the glorious past.
In the glorious past, and Tolkien kind of believed that about Earth as well. He kind of believed everything just got steadily worse. That was like his.
I think he's right about that.
I don't know. I think it depends on.
It depends how you look at it. Because when we got to think about it with Tolkien. He grew up and saw the industrialization of Britain. He saw the lands he fell in love with that inspired like the Shire and all these land of Middle Earth in his mind, and he saw small villages become towns and then cities.
Yeah, he saw a lot of that.
And forests chopped down to feed the beasts of industry.
Yeah, so I mean, but the wonderful thing about time in general, when it comes to advancements or whatever, is that everything takes such a long time. And if you look at the glorious past of the ancient Greeks, that fell into the Dark Ages, and then the ancient Greeks fell to the Romans, and the Romans fell to the Dark Ages, and then rose out of the Dark Ages with things like the Renaissance, but things like that take a very long time. I can understand how he saw that in his own life. Yeah.
What's your favorite chapter?
To be honest, I love the early part of Fellowship of the Ring, like before they even leave, before they meet Strider.
I really like. I really love everything with the Black Riders because it just constantly feels like Frodo just can't shake these riders, and they're just like so terrifying. Like, was it A Knife in the Dark and Flight to the Ford? I really like those. Are pretty intense.
I really like in the chapter 3 is Company. This is one that has really stuck out to me. This is like an example of this fairy tale thing. In 3 is Company, they're stopped. Like Frodo, Pippin, and Sam are stopped, and they're curled up under a tree, and they fall asleep on their way from Hobbiton to it was Buckland, isn't it? He was quite right, but he never found out any more about it.
He just has this like random passage of a fox. It's like, that's pretty strange. That's weird.
I love stuff like that. Yeah, for me, the early part is really magical. And I love like the part of the story while they still call Aragorn Strider, because Strider is such a badass. And I love Moria. That's got it. And you're right, Lothlorien is really fantastic. But probably in the Fellowship of the Ring, Moria is probably my favorite.
Council of Elrond has to get some recognition as well. It's like the longest chapter, and not just Fellowship, but the entire book. It's the longest chapter by far, but it's also the biggest exposition dump. You learn about the dwarves, you learn about the elves, you learn about what Gandalf was up to, why he was delayed, and everything with Saruman. You learn about Gondor and Boromir, and you finally learn about Aragorn is this great king, and that the ring actually belongs to him and not to Frodo. And you also learn about stuff in The Hobbit and Bilbo's journeys. There's so much information that's like covered in that chapter alone.
Yeah, it's a bit. I mean, I get a bit. The exposition is quite heavy.
Quite heavy. Like if they If for the film, if it was faithfully adapted from like, word to word, page to page, that scene would be like 40, 50 minutes long.
Oh yeah.
I think a lot of the information given in the Council of Elrond chapter was shifted to the prologue of the movie.
Yeah, right.
Which makes sense for at least a movie-going audience. You have to kind of give your audience like setup of all that information first. The movies, we both love the movies, even though we haven't said that many nice things about them.
Oh,
they take a much more. They adapt the books into much more of an action adventure suspense story. It's much more action packed and has much more thumping tempo than the books do.
It does. I mean, to be honest, I do think that the movies are the best book to movie adaptation.
Yeah, they're quite extraordinary.
They're really amazing, and they're really extraordinary. Other favorite chapter, I love Helm's Deep. That chapter is fantastic.
I remember we've talked many years about this, and you've always said you actually prefer Helm's Deep in the book to the movie.
Yeah, because in the movie they get to Helm's Deep, and they wait for ages. And there's that part with like the elves show up, and then they're in there, and it starts raining, and it's slowly marching towards them, and it takes days. Whereas in the book, they're being chased by the armies of Saruman, and they just have enough time to get through the gate and close the gate, and they have to turn around and start fighting, and it's really intense.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, to me, that was it's way more like Helm's Deep in the movie is epic, but there's a couple of really dumb things about it, like how they kill so many, and there's still just as many outside when they ride out to.
Well, they have an oncoming army of 10,000 Uruk-hai, so
the 10,000 actually isn't that much, like it's not like 10,000 is a lot, but like for an entire night with all of them, like they have 10,000 would kind of fill that space.
Well, I mean, we're talking about a siege of a giant fortress castle that's forted in the crevice of a mountain. That'd be incredibly difficult to attack for most standing armies, and even one as outfitted as the Uruk-hai. Even they probably couldn't take Helm's Deep in a single night.
Yeah, unless you have dynamite up your sleeve.
Well, in the movie they use explosives, but in the book it's actually Saruman throws like magic fireballs from Orthanc all the way across. And
does he really?
Yeah. He smites the wall of Helm's Deep with magic from the top of Orthanc. This is not in.
Wow.
This is not in the movie. In the movie, they do something kind of clever, actually. He gives the orcs bombs with a bunch of coal and gunpowder that when it's set aflame, it, like, bursts.
Yeah,
it's almost like, I kind of see it as a way as the role the wizards play in Middle-earth. The wizards are there to kind of usher and guide the races of Middle-earth along through evolution and technological advancements. And Saruman kind of almost like cheat codes his way by giving his army more like advanced technology that probably wouldn't have been invented by people's generations from the time in the story, but he skips and cheat codes and gives his army this incredible advantage to blow up this wall, so that when it happens in the movie and that explosion happens, like not only the orcs but all like the men turn to it and they see this explosion. They've never seen anything like that in their lives.
Right, yeah.
And it kind of just speaks to like all these like cheats that Saruman did is why Gandalf was brought back to become the White Wizard. Because Saruman the White Wizard at the time had lost his way and become corrupt.
Yeah.
Perhaps I'm looking too far into it, but I don't think I am. I think that was very intended by the filmmakers.
Yeah, no, I think that's an interesting point, actually. I love that with this, like, Grima Wormtongue comes over with a candle.
Yeah, he's like, don't let the flame close to it. How can fire undo stone? What kind of device could bring down the wall? Yeah, and then Saruman just kind of like, don't let the flame touch it. Because he knows he's kind of cheated his way. He'll do anything to get the ring and defeat.
How amazing would it be if that was how Saruman died? Like, there's not even Helm's Deep.
That should be in that YouTube video series, How It Should Have Ended. Speaking of deviations from the book, Saruman does not die or is left unattended at Isengard. In fact, he is left unattended at Isengard and he escapes to the Shire. This is a perhaps an even bigger deviation from the book than leaving out Tom Bombadil.
Oh yeah, because they get back to the Shire and Saruman's taken over the Shire.
Yeah,
And then,
I think the filmmakers made for at least the movies, I think they made the correct choice to leave
I
out
think so.
the chapters of the Scouring of the Shire, because it really does come off as more story after the story. Because like the ring's destroyed, victory is won, and the characters, and we gotta wrap things up. All of a sudden, they get home, and there's now more conflict. Basically, like the four hobbits return, and now they've got to like save Hobbiton from Saruman and Grima Wormtongue.
Yeah,
It does come off as just like more story after the story is wrapped up, but it's important for at least the context of the book, because I'm sure Tolkien felt this when he came home after the First World War. Home wasn't the same.
I never thought about it that way.
Yeah,
that's a really interesting thing.
And even his home felt the long.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way.
No.
Whereas in the movie, they return home and everything's exactly the same as it was.
The filmmakers really keep it centered on Frodo and his he's kind of got like PTSD, like he still hasn't really recovered from his entire journey with his wound at Weathertop and, losing the ring. Like, they're pretty faithful to that, but leaving out the Scouring of the Shire, I think, was, for the movie, was appropriate, but it still holds very important thematic weight and the message.
Right, yeah. Yeah, it's true. But yeah, it kind of, by the end of the movie, you're exhausted. So if they came back and Saruman and he's living in Bag End too, right?
Yeah. Yeah, they made the wise choice. They still capture the essence of Lord of the Rings, the story.
So the movies are amazing, but it's just one thing that I really appreciate is that you can watch the movies, and then when you read the books, it is like a different universe. Whereas it's very difficult. Like I read The Great Gatsby recently, and The Great Gatsby is like almost word for word in the movie, and so it's really hard to imagine the book differently. Whereas Lord of the Rings is like, it's so different. But the thing that I don't know how he did as a writer is the magic. It's like there's like the Lord of the Rings is magical. It's like there's this feeling of magic that comes off of the page, and I have no idea how he did that. And I don't know whether that's just me because I'm biased and I love it, but I don't think it is. He's able to really get this feeling of mystic magic.
Yeah, I see.
And he gets this kind of, like what you were saying with the Lothlorien chapter, and I get it with Rivendell as well when they first get to Rivendell. And also in Moria, after Moria, when they gaze into that lake, the Mirror, that has the mirror image of a night sky in it at the daytime. Something, there's just something really magical about the entire thing, and there's a magic to the prose, as it were.
I think it's also because he had such an affinity for nature and the natural world.
Yes, he did. He obviously knows his trees.
He kind of used the Ents of Fangorn Forest and Treebeard as to kind of give the forest a voice and give the forest almost like a fantasy. A fantasy where the forest fights back. It's almost like I love when you said you told me long ago. It's like he read Macbeth and he was disappointed that the trees didn't actually come alive and fight. And he's like,
was that the thing?
I think actually I thought you told me this, that he read Macbeth or saw the play of Macbeth and he was disappointed that the trees didn't actually come to life and fight back against the lumber cutting humans.
Yeah, they do. And I love that line that I'm on nobody's side because no one's on my side.
Yeah.
Treebeard has.
The trees are not, they can't really take a side until it's the hobbits. They're like two stones that cause an avalanche.
Yeah.
I love that line.
It's really beautiful.
And it's the hobbits almost like trick Treebeard into seeing the desolation and the destruction caused by Saruman and the orcs of all like the lumber being pulled from the ground of Fangorn Forest to feed his fires of industry, and that's what kind of pisses off the trees, and they begin their assault, the last march of the Ents. So that's probably one of my favorite parts, because like I'm a very I love stories with themes of environmentalism. I don't know, that's resonates and connects with me because I have an affection for the natural world, and I had a kind of a similar experience in my childhood in life where I saw a forest that I love get ripped up by bulldozers, and it made me very sad. Anything like where the natural world gets to, get some payback against the humans always connects with me. And like whenever, especially in the film, that beautiful Howard Shore music plays with that soloist singer. I think he was like a young boy, and it says that beautiful song is the trees march in the night to attack Isengard in the morning.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I love that. When I was a kid, that was my favorite part, when they go marching down the hill there.
It's really beautiful. I almost wish the trees would wake up in real life and, get some payback.
By tipping over Amazon trucks and things like that, yeah.
Yeah, it'd be great.
That'd be, yeah.
He had a real affection for the natural world, and it really comes in his descriptions. I mean, aside from him creating all these languages for these like fictional civilizations, he also created the famous map that's at the beginning of every single edition of all the books.
Yeah,
the map is a very important piece. You're meant to, as you're reading the story, you're meant to go back to the map periodically throughout to kind of like track where the characters are going. It makes you feel more connected to their journey, where you can see where they are. I wish all fantasy worlds came with an illustrated map by the author. I wish that was more standardized. Like, remember, I don't think you ever watched Game of Thrones, did you?
I watched the first 2 seasons, and I read the first 2 books.
Okay, so you did read them. But I remember when I first started I never read the books, but I watched the series, and I remember very early on, I was very lost because there's so many names and stuff being thrown at you all the time, but at the intro of every single episode, it always showed you the map.
Yeah,
where all the different kingdoms and realms were. It just kind of helped you orient yourself in the setting. It's so helpful. And I think that's another of Tolkien's influence, having that map always being a prevalent part of the storytelling.
Yeah, and he was a good illustrator too. Like, he did some really good pictures of, like, he drew the map, and he had some good illustrations for both The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. Yeah.
Even draws places that none of the books even go to. Like, he draws the map of where Angmar, the kingdom of Angmar, is way, way up in like the tundra north of Middle Earth, and then like Mirkwood and beyond into like the Blue Mountains.
Yeah,
he's got to talk about so many names and cultures and languages. He's also got to tell you where they all come from.
Yeah. So that's Tolkien, isn't it?
Well, this was like our first crack at Rebel Artists Through Time, and I don't think we could have thought of a better first artist to talk about in our first episode. We both know a lot about and care a lot about his stories that had a deep impact on both our lives.
I also think it's a nice introduction to a rebel who's not a rebel because they're a raucous character, but just because of their creativity. Is a really good place to start.
I don't think Tolkien would call himself a rebel, but his work was revolutionary regardless.
It certainly was, and it lives on in us.
Thanks, Tolkien. Well, your works have brought us much joy in our lives.
You sure have.
All right, well, until next time, my friend. You've been listening to Rebel Artists Through Time. We created this podcast as our own act of rebellion against perfection, against silence, and to remind each other that we're part of something bigger. If something here sparked an idea for you, take it forward, share it, create from it, because that's what this is all about. Connection across time through art. We're so glad you joined us, and until next time, keep creating.